The message was meant for my husband. It arrived at 12:37 in the morning, detailed and intimate, describing a night he was not home, but the sender was not Dylan. It was his mistress. A single typo in the contact list dropped the words, "I can still taste you," right into my lap. I did not scream. I sent exactly one reply, and that single sentence derailed a pending public offering and 3 lives forever. My name is Harriet Foster. I am 32 years old, and I analyze financial fraud for a living. At Grayline Analytics in Riverside Hill, my job is to look at a chaotic spreadsheet of numbers and spot the single decimal point that does not belong. I find the lie hidden inside the truth. So, when my phone rang at 7:15 on a Monday morning, shattering the quiet hum of my espresso machine, I did not need caller ID to tell me that the week was about to go sideways. The number was blocked. I hate blocked numbers. They usually mean telemarketers or guilt-ridden relatives, but this early in the morning, they typically mean trouble. I wiped a spot of coffee grounds from the granite counter, slid the unlock bar, and held the phone to my ear without speaking. Silence is a powerful negotiator. I learned that in my first year at Grayline. "Is this Mrs. Foster?" The voice was male, baritone, and clipped. It sounded expensive. It sounded like billable hours. "Speaking," I said. My voice was calm. It always is. "My name is Arthur Sterling. I represent Camille Hart." The name hung in the air between us, suspended in the steam rising from my mug. Camille Hart. 2 months ago, that name would have meant nothing more to me than a signature on my husband's bonus check or a face in the society pages of the Riverside Gazette. Now, the name tasted like battery acid. "I am listening," I said. "Mrs. Foster, I am calling to inform you that we are preparing a cease and desist order regarding your recent communications with the board of Nova Pulse Media. Furthermore, we are looking into a civil suit for defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress." I walked over to the dining table and opened my laptop. The screen came to life. Recognizing my face instantly, my fingers hovered over the trackpad. "Defamation implies I lied. Mr. Sterling," I said, navigating through 3 layers of security to a hidden partition on my hard drive. "I assume you have seen the files." "We are aware of the materials," he snapped, losing his cool faster than I expected. "But that is not the point. We are arguing entrapment. We are arguing that you deliberately manipulated my client via text message. Because of that single interaction, Ms. Hart has been removed from her position as vice president. Her industry certification is suspended pending an ethics review. She is facing a shareholder lawsuit. Her life is in ruins." I double-clicked the folder named Hart Project. It opened to reveal a grid of hundreds of files, screenshots, bank statements, audio logs, GPS data cross-referenced with credit card receipts. Every file was named with a precise date and timestamp. It was beautiful in a terrified, brutal way. It was the anatomy of a betrayal, dissected and pinned to the board. "Mrs. Foster, are you still there?" "I am here." "If you had not sent that text message that night," the lawyer's voice dropped an octave, becoming almost pleading in its aggression, "none of this would have happened. My client was vulnerable. You took advantage of a mistake. You pulled the trigger." I looked at the file dated 6 weeks ago, the very first one. "You want to know what I sent, Mr. Sterling?" I asked softly. "I have the transcript right here," he hissed. "Good. Then you know I didn't pull the trigger," I said, my eyes scanning the file name. "I just turned on the lights." I hung up the phone. I stood there in the morning light of my suburban kitchen, the silence rushing back in. He was right about one thing. It all hinged on one sentence. One moment where I chose not to be the weeping wife, but the analyst. You probably want to know what I wrote. I will tell you. But to understand the weight of those 12 words, you have to understand the silence that came before them. You have to go back to the night the lie finally stopped being polite. 6 weeks ago, it was a Tuesday, or maybe a Wednesday. The days had started to blur together into a gray smear of lonely dinners and cold sheets. I was sitting in the living room, the only light coming from the street lamp outside filtering through the sheer curtains. The television was off. I was not reading. I was just waiting. That had become my primary occupation in the marriage, waiting for Dylan to come home, waiting for him to notice me, waiting for the version of the man I married to return from whatever corporate war he claimed to be fighting. Dylan Foster, my husband, the man who had started buying sandalwood cologne that cost $300 a bottle, even though he used to say cologne gave him a headache, the man who suddenly had emergency strategy meetings at 11 at night. My phone was sitting on the armrest of the beige sofa. It was 12:37 in the morning. The screen lit up. A single vibration buzzed against the fabric. I looked at it, expecting a notification from my security app or a spam email. Instead, it was a text message. From a number I did not have saved. Dylan. Tonight at the hotel was different. I am still shaking. I can still taste you. I know you had to rush back to her. But God, I miss you already. I stared at the words. In the movies, this is the part where the wife screams. She throws the phone against the wall. She collapses in tears. She hyperventilates. I did none of those things. My heart rate actually slowed down. I felt a cold, metallic sensation wash over my brain, a physical shift that I knew well. It was the same feeling I got at work when I found a discrepancy in a ledger that everyone else had signed off on. It was the feeling of the hunt. Tonight at the hotel was different. Fact 1, Dylan had told me he was at the office finishing a slide deck for the Japanese investors. I know you had to rush back to her. Fact 2. Her was me. The obstacle. The obligation. I picked up the phone. My hand was steady. I unlocked the screen and looked at the number. Area code 917. New York-based, but likely a cell phone. I took a screenshot immediately. Then I went to my laptop and pulled up our cell provider's usage log, which I had secretly synced to my cloud account 3 weeks prior when the late night started. I ran a search for the number. There it was. It appeared 42 times in the last month. Most calls were during business hours, disguised as work, but the duration told a different story. 40 minutes at 10 at night, an hour at 7 in the morning on a Saturday when he said he was at the gym. I looked back at the text message. The sender, this mistress, had made a fatal error. She had clearly meant to select Dylan's name from her contacts, but in the haze of postcoital dopamine, or perhaps just wine, she had typed the number manually or selected the wrong Foster if we were listed close together in some database she had access to. Or maybe, just maybe, the universe simply decided it was time for the books to balance. I sat there for 4 minutes. The timestamp changed to 12:41. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. I could hear the refrigerator compressor hum. I could visualize Dylan driving home, perhaps checking his teeth in the rearview mirror, practicing the lie he would tell me when he walked through the door. I did not want to yell. Yelling is messy. Yelling gives the other person a chance to defend themselves, to gaslight you, to call you crazy. I did not want to give Dylan or this woman the satisfaction of my emotion. I wanted to give them consequences. If I stayed silent, she would realize her mistake eventually and delete the message. If I screamed, she would block me and go underground. I needed to secure the evidence. I needed to lock her into the narrative. I needed to make sure that from this moment on, she was not just an observer of my marriage, but an active participant in its demolition. My thumbs hovered over the glass keyboard. I typed a reply. I did not hesitate. I did not backspace. I wrote exactly what needed to be written to ensure that nobody would sleep tonight. I hit send. To understand why I didn't throw the phone across the room that night, you have to look at the 6 months leading up to it. A marriage does not explode all at once. It erodes. It chips away silently, like a cliff face battered by the ocean, until one day, the ground simply isn't there anymore. Dylan and I had been married for 7 years. We lived in Riverside Hill, a neighborhood where the lawns are manicured to within an inch of their lives, and the silence is so heavy it feels like a physical weight. It was the kind of life we were supposed to want. Dylan was the creative director at Novapulse Media, a digital agency that was constantly in the news for its innovative campaigns and aggressive growth. I was the steady one, the anchor, the one who made sure the mortgage was paid and the tax returns were filed early. The changes were subtle at first. They were small variations in the data set of our daily existence. It started with the smell. For 7 years, Dylan wore a generic drugstore deodorant and, on special occasions, a bottle of department store cologne his mother gave him for Christmas. He smelled like soap and clean laundry. Then, on a Tuesday in October, he came home smelling like burnt wood and exotic spices. It was rich, heavy, and expensive. I found the bottle hidden in the back of the bathroom vanity a week later. It cost $350. When I asked him about it, he shrugged and said he needed to upgrade his personal brand. He said that in the creative industry, presentation was currency, then came the clothes. Dylan used to hate shopping. I bought his shirts. I bought his socks. Suddenly, packages started arriving from high-end tailors in the city. Slim-fit dress shirts that hugged his shoulders. Italian leather loafers that cost more than our monthly car insurance payment. He started waking up at 5 in the morning to go to the gym. He told me he was joining the guys from the creative team for morning lifts, that it was good for bonding. I watched him leave the house in the pre-dawn darkness, his gym bag swinging over his shoulder, and I felt a cold prickle of suspicion at the base of my neck. But suspicion is not evidence. In my line of work, suspicion is just a hypothesis. You cannot convict someone on a feeling. So I started watching. I did not hack his phone, not yet. I simply observed the anomalies in his schedule. The calendar on our refrigerator, once a shared source of truth, became a work of fiction. There were late-night brainstorming sessions that dragged on until 2 in the morning. There were sudden crises with clients in London or Tokyo that required him to be online at odd hours. There were weekend strategy offsites at downtown hotels. I remember finding a receipt in the pocket of his charcoal suit jacket. I was taking it to the dry cleaner. The receipt was crumpled into a tight ball, as if he had squeezed it in a moment of anxiety and then forgotten to toss it. I smoothed it out on the laundry room counter, the Laurel Room, 7:30 in the evening on a Thursday, 2 appetizers, 2 entrees, a bottle of Sancerre, $180. On that Thursday, Dylan had told me he was ordering pizza at the office with the interns. I did not confront him. Not then. Instead, I pulled out my phone. I opened a note-taking app that looks like a calculator on the home screen but requires a 6-digit passcode to access. I created a new entry. I took a photograph of the receipt. I logged the date, the time, and the contradiction. 2 weeks later, another receipt appeared. Miro Vine, a trendy tapas bar in the Arts District, $300. He had told me he was at a mandatory HR seminar. I started to feel like I was living with a ghost. He was physically present in our house, eating the dinner I cooked, sleeping on the left side of our king-sized bed. But his mind was somewhere else. He was vibrating on a frequency I could not access. When he looked at me, his eyes were glazed over, as if he were looking through me to something more interesting on the other side. One Saturday morning over breakfast, I decided to test the waters. The sunlight was streaming into our kitchen, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Dylan was scrolling through his phone, smiling at something on the screen. "I feel like I never see you anymore," I said. My voice was quiet. I was buttering a piece of toast, keeping my hands busy so they wouldn't shake. Dylan didn't look up. "We are just busy. Harriet, the IPO is coming up. You know that. It is not just the work. Dylan, it feels like you are checking out. You are different. The gym, the clothes, the late nights." He finally looked up then. The smile vanished, replaced by a look of weary condescension that made my stomach turn. He set his phone down, screen side down. "Of course. God. Harriet, are we really doing this?" he asked. He let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. "You are being paranoid. I am not being paranoid. I am being observant. You are being jealous," he snapped. "Look, I know your job is boring. I know you spend all day looking at spreadsheets and hunting for bad guys, but do not bring that energy into our marriage. I am finally succeeding. I am finally getting recognition. Camille says I am doing the best work of my career, and instead of supporting me, you are looking for holes to poke in it." Camille. There was that name again. Camille Hart, 41 years old, Vice President of Creative. I had heard her name a dozen times in the last month. Camille thinks we should pivot the strategy. Camille loved my pitch. Camille is really mentoring me. Dylan spoke about her with a reverence he used to reserve for his favorite musicians. She was not just a boss to him, she was the audience he was performing for. She is just my boss. Harriet, Dylan said, standing up and taking his coffee to the sink. She believes in me. She sees my potential. Why can't you be happy that someone finally sees my value? He was gaslighting me. I recognized the technique immediately. It is a common tactic among fraudsters when they are cornered. They attack the investigator's credibility. They appeal to emotion. They paint themselves as the victim of success and the accuser as petty and small-minded. In my head, I did not get angry. I simply visualized a red flag being planted in the map of our marriage. Code 404, deflection and projection. I watched him walk out of the kitchen, righteous indignation radiating off his shoulders. He felt safe. He thought he had won the argument because he had made me feel small. He thought that because I didn't scream back, I had accepted his version of reality. He didn't know that I had already looked up Camille Hart on LinkedIn. I knew she had been divorced twice. I knew she had a reputation for churning through executive assistants. I knew she lived in a penthouse downtown, 3 blocks from the gym Dylan had suddenly joined. I spent the next few weeks in a state of hypervigilance. I stopped asking questions. I stopped complaining about the late nights. I became the perfect, supportive wife. I made sure his shirts were pressed. I asked polite questions about the IPO. And all the while, I was building the file. I logged every time he mentioned her name. I logged every time his phone buzzed, and he angled the screen away from me. I logged the mileage on his car, noting the discrepancies between his office commute and the extra miles that mysteriously appeared on Tuesday and Thursday nights. But patterns are not proof. In a court of law, or in the court of public opinion, circumstantial evidence is weak. A receipt is just a receipt. A late night is just work. A mentor is just a mentor. I could not blow up my life based on a hunch. I needed the smoking gun. I needed the undeniable variable that would turn my theory into a fact. I was waiting for them to slip. Arrogance always leads to errors. People who think they are smarter than everyone else eventually get lazy. They stop clearing their browser history. They leave a credit card receipt on the dashboard. Or, in the age of digital communication, they trust technology too much. So when that text message arrived 6 weeks later, flashing on the screen in the darkness of our living room, I wasn't surprised. I wasn't heartbroken. I was relieved. The missing piece had finally arrived. The investigation was over. The prosecution was about to begin. The blue light of my laptop screen was the only thing illuminating the living room. It was 1:19 in the morning. I was cross-referencing a timeline for a suspicious slip-and-fall claim in Ohio, trying to determine if the claimant could truly have driven a manual transmission truck 40 minutes after allegedly breaking his right ankle. My mind was filled with timestamps, medical codes, and toll road logs. The house was silent, save for the rhythmic, heavy breathing of my husband sleeping in the bedroom down the hall. Then my phone vibrated against the mahogany coffee table. It was a short, sharp buzz, a notification. I did not look at it immediately. I finished typing a note about the discrepancy in the toll log, saved the file, and closed the laptop lid. Only then did I reach for the device. The screen displayed a preview of a message from a number I did not have saved in my contacts. It was not a spam text about a package delivery or a political campaign. It was a block of text, dense and breathless. Dylan, I cannot sleep. Room 1903 feels empty now that you are gone. I keep thinking about the way you looked at me in the freight elevator. I know you had to leave before 4 to get back to the wife, but God. Tonight at the Arcadia Suites changed everything. I stared at the glowing pixels. For a moment, the world simply stopped. It did not shatter. It did not spin. It froze. My brain, trained by a decade of forensic accounting and fraud detection, bypassed the emotional centers and went straight to the analytical processor. Arcadia Suites. I knew that name. I had seen it 3 weeks ago on the Joint American Express statement. Dylan had told me it was a booking for a visiting consultant from the London office. He had even complained about the price of the room service. Room 1903. Freight elevator. Get back to the wife. The details were too specific to be a prank. They were too intimate to be a misunderstanding. This was data. This was a confession. I sat perfectly still. In my head, I saw the movie version of this scene. The wife storms into the bedroom. She turns on the overhead lights. She screams. She throws the phone at the cheating husband's chest. She demands answers. She cries until her throat burns. But I am not a character in a melodrama. I am an investigator. And an investigator never reveals they have found the smoking gun until the case is airtight. If I woke Dylan now, he would lie. He would say it was a prank from a buddy. He would say I was misinterpreting things. He would delete the evidence. He would warn her. They would coordinate their stories, align their timelines, and gaslight me until I doubted my own sanity. No. I picked up the phone and took a screenshot. Then I opened the folder I had buried deep in my system files, the one containing the raw data download of our family cellular plan. I pulled up the call log for the last 60 days. I typed the incoming number into the search bar. It appeared 58 times. Late nights, commutes, Sunday mornings when he was supposedly picking up bagels. The number matched. The duration matched. The connection was undeniable. I looked back at the text message. The sender, Camille, although she had not signed her name, was clearly waiting for a response. She was waiting for validation. She wanted Dylan to text back and say he missed her too. She wanted to prolong the dopamine hit of their illicit night. She had made a critical error in her address book. She had sent the message to the wrong Foster. I decided then that I would not be the victim. I would be the consequence. My thumbs moved coolly over the glass screen. I did not type with fury. I typed with precision. He is asleep next to his wife, but thank you for the detailed update on my husband's schedule. I pressed send. I watched the screen. I watched the timestamp change from 1:23 to 1:24. I counted the seconds in my head. 1, 2, 3. At 48 seconds, the 3 little dots appeared. They danced, then vanished, then danced again. She was typing. She was deleting. She was typing again. Panic has a very specific digital rhythm. Then, the flood came. Oh my God, I am so sorry. I think I have the wrong number. Please ignore that. It was a joke. A stupid joke for a friend. I am so sorry if this caused any confusion. It is strictly work-related. I was just messing around. Please do not show him this. It was a mistake. I read her panic like a ticker tape. She was spiraling. She was trying to throw every possible defense at the wall to see what would stick. A joke. A mistake. Work. I could picture her. Camille Hart, 41 years old. Successful. Poised. Likely sitting in a high-thread count sheet set in room 1903 of the Arcadia Suites. Her heart hammering against her ribs. Realizing she had just handed the nuclear launch codes to the enemy, I let her sweat for 2 full minutes. I let the silence stretch out, heavy and terrifying. I wanted her to imagine me waking him up. I wanted her to imagine me calling her boss. I wanted her to imagine the implosion of her carefully curated reputation. But I was not going to do any of that, not yet. I needed her to know that the dynamic had shifted. I needed her to understand that she was no longer the other woman. She was now my informant. I typed one final message. You have 2 choices. Either fight with me like in some private group chat, or you stay silent, collect everything, and let me show you the real consequences of a wrong number. I sent it. The status changed to read instantly. She did not type back. There were no more dancing dots, no more apologies, just a dead, heavy silence. I took screenshots of the entire exchange. I exported them to a PDF. I moved the file into a new encrypted folder on my laptop. I named the folder Heart Project. I looked down the hallway at the dark door of our bedroom. Dylan was still sleeping. He had no idea that his life had effectively ended 5 minutes ago. He had no idea that while he dreamed, his mistress had accidentally handed me the knife, and I had just decided exactly where I was going to place it. I did not know exactly how far this would go. I did not know then that I would end up in a boardroom or a lawyer's office. But I knew one thing for certain: I was done reacting. From this moment on, I was building a case, and I never lose a case. The morning sun was too bright. It hit the granite island in my kitchen with an aggressive cheerfulness that felt like a personal insult. I pulled the blinds down, plunging the room back into a gray, manageable gloom. I did not make coffee. Caffeine makes the hands shake, and today, I needed my hands to be steady. I opened my laptop and logged into a private cloud server I had purchased 3 years ago for storing sensitive work archives. I created a new directory. I did not name it divorce or cheating or anything emotional. I named it Heart Project. It was 7:15 in the morning. Dylan was in the shower, singing. He was singing Rocket Man. He sounded happy. He sounded like a man who thought he had gotten away with it. I began the migration. I connected my phone to the laptop and offloaded the screenshots from the night before. The timestamps were the backbone of the case. 1:19 in the morning, 1:24, 1:45. I imported the raw data from the cellular provider. The 3 months of call logs I had downloaded while Dylan was sleeping 2 weeks ago. I imported the credit card statements I had scanned as PDFs. Then, I started building the timeline. In fraud investigation, we call this the genesis point. You have to find the moment the behavior deviated from the baseline. I scrolled back to October 14th. That was the day he came home wearing the sandalwood cologne. I marked it on the digital timeline. Subject alters personal grooming habits. I moved to October 22nd. The credit card statement showed a charge for $240 at a bistro in the city. On that night, Dylan's calendar said, "Late team sync." I cross-referenced this with the call log. At 10:15 that night, there was a 12-minute call to the number ending in 492. Camille's number. I moved to November 4th. The strategy offsite. He had packed an overnight bag. He had kissed me on the forehead and told me not to wait up because the team was grinding hard for the IPO. The American Express bill showed a charge for the Arcadia suites. Room service for 2, a movie rental. I dragged the screenshot of last night's text message into the timeline. It was the keystone. Tonight at the hotel was different. It linked the location Arcadia Suites to the person. It confirmed that the strategy offsite was not a team event. It was a tryst. By 8:30, I had a visual map of my husband's infidelity. It looked like a constellation of lies. I needed a second opinion, not a therapist, a shark. I dialed Mara Lewis. We had worked together at a boutique firm 5 years ago before she pivoted to employment law at Easton and Pike LLP. Mara was the kind of lawyer who wore stilettos not for fashion, but as potential weaponry. She picked up on the second ring. "Harriet Foster," she said, her voice raspy with morning commute stress. "To what do I owe the pleasure? Please tell me you are calling to tell me Gray Line finally imploded." "Not yet," I said. "I need to ask you a hypothetical question, strictly off the record." The line went quiet. Mara shifted gears instantly. "I am listening." "Hypothetically," I began, staring at the timeline on my screen. If a high-level executive at a company preparing for an initial public offering were engaging in a sexual relationship with a direct subordinate, and that subordinate was using company resources to facilitate the affair, what is the exposure? "Harriet," Mara said, her tone dropping. "Who are we talking about?" "Hypothetical, Mara," she sighed. "Okay, if the company is pre-IPO, the exposure is nuclear. Investors hate volatility. An undisclosed relationship between a superior and a subordinate is a walking lawsuit. It screams coercion, conflict of interest, and hostile work environment. If they are using company cards for hotels, that is misappropriation of funds. If they are booking rooms during work hours, that is time theft. And if the subordinate is also married?" I asked. "Irrelevant to the company, usually," Mara said. "But if the company has a morals clause or a strict ethics policy, which every company prepping for a public listing does, it is immediate termination, zero tolerance. They cannot risk the stock price tanking because the VP of Creative can't keep it in his pants." My eyes drifted to the folder named Financials. "What if there is proof?" I asked. "Digital proof, texts, receipts, GPS data." "Then it is not a scandal. Harriet, It is a leverage play. If that evidence lands on the desk of a compliance officer or the board of directors before the IPO, they will cut the cancer out immediately. They have to. Fiduciary duty. I felt a cold thrill run down my spine. Thanks, Mara. That is all I needed. Harriet, she warned. Be careful. Whoever this hypothetical friend is, tell her to make sure her own hands are clean before she lights the match. I hung up. My hands were clean, but they were busy. That evening, the house was quiet again. Dylan came home late, feigning exhaustion. He poured himself a generous glass of Japanese whiskey, another new affectation, and collapsed onto the beige sectional sofa. He loosened his tie. He complained about the vision decks and the stakeholder pressure. I sat in the armchair, reading a book I hadn't turned the page of in 40 minutes. I watched him. I watched the way he swirled the amber liquid. I watched his eyelids grow heavy. By 10:45, the glass was empty on the coaster, and Dylan was snoring softly, his head tipped back against the cushion. His phone was resting on his thigh. I moved. I did not creep. I walked with purpose. I picked up his phone. I knew the passcode, 4489. It was the last 4 digits of his social security number. He was not a complex man. I unlocked it. The brightness stung my eyes. I went straight to iMessage. There it was, pinned at the very top. Not me, not his mother. CH, a gray circle with her initials. I opened the thread. My stomach did not drop. It tightened. It was a catalog of intimacy. It wasn't just sex. It was worse. It was emotional displacement. November 12th. You are the only one who understands the vision. Dylan, I feel like I'm talking to a wall with everyone else. November 15th. I hate going home to an empty apartment, wishing you were here to hold me. November 20th. Image attachment. I tapped the image. It was a photo taken under a table, a bar table, likely darkly lit. 2 hands were interlaced. His hand, with the wedding band I had placed on his finger, resting on top of her manicured hand. Her thumb was stroking his wrist. It was repulsive. It was tender. It was proof that he wasn't just cheating. He was building a parallel life. I did not forward the messages to myself. That leaves a digital trail on the sender's device. Instead, I pulled out my own phone. I took high-resolution photos of the screen. I scrolled up, click, scrolled up, click. I captured the dates. I captured the I love you sent at 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. I captured the hotel emoji sent, along with a room number. I captured the way they mocked me. December 2nd. Dylan. She is asking about the late nights again. I told her I'm just grinding for the launch. December 2nd. Camille. Poor thing. She just does not get it. We are building an empire, baby. Let her bake cookies or whatever she does. I stared at the words. Whatever she does. I do not bake cookies. Camille, I dismantle fraudulent schemes. And you just gave me the blueprints to your own destruction. I locked his phone and placed it back on his thigh, exactly as I had found it. I went to the guest room, which I had been using as a home office for the past month. I opened my laptop. I uploaded the new photos to the Heart Project folder. Then, I created a backup. I zipped the entire directory and emailed it to a Proton Mail account I had created using a VPN. An account that existed nowhere on our shared devices. I sat there for a long time, watching the upload bar creep toward 100%. I walked back out to the living room. Dylan was still asleep. His mouth was slightly open. He looked soft, vulnerable. He looked like the man I had loved for 7 years. I waited for the tears. I waited for the grief to buckle my knees. I waited for the urge to wake him up and scream and demand he explain why I wasn't enough. But nothing came. I felt absolutely nothing. It was a strange, hollow sensation, like a room where all the furniture had been removed. I looked at him and I did not see a husband. I saw a target. I saw a liability. I saw a data point that needed to be corrected. I realized then that the Harriet who would have cried over this was gone. She had been deleted along with the trust. In her place was someone else, someone colder, someone who understood that in a war between emotion and evidence, Evidence always wins. I had the knife in my hand. It was sharp, and it was heavy. I stood over his sleeping form, metaphorically speaking, and I didn't wonder if I should use it. I only wondered where the cut would bleed the most. I turned off the lamp, leaving him in the dark, for 48 hours. The digital line between me and Camille Hart was dead. I went to work. I analyzed spreadsheets. I drank my coffee black. I watched Dylan leave for the office in his new Italian loafers, looking over his shoulder as if he could feel the crosshairs on his back, even though he didn't know who was holding the rifle. Then, on Thursday afternoon, my phone buzzed. I was in the middle of a meeting about a recurring vendor overbilling scheme in the Midwest. I glanced down. It was her. "Can we talk?" "Please, I need to explain." I did not reply immediately. In interrogation, silence is a vacuum. People hate vacuums. They fill them with words, and usually, those words are incriminating. 10 minutes later, another message. "Look, I know what you must think, but it is not like that. It was a mistake, a moment of weakness." I slid my phone under the conference table and typed a response. I didn't use capitalization. I kept it flat. A moment of weakness that lasted 3 months. The reply came instantly. She was glued to her screen. "He told me you two were done. He said you were just roommates. He said you didn't care about him anymore. I swear. Harriet, if I can call you that, I never meant to hurt you." I almost laughed out loud in the middle of the conference room. He told me, the oldest line in the adulterer's handbook. It was almost charming in its banality. But I wasn't interested in her guilt. I was interested in her logistics. I typed back, shifting the tone from angry wife to curious observer. "So when did this moment start? Was it the strategy offsite in November?" I waited. This was the gamble. If she was smart, she would shut up. But she wasn't smart. She was scared. And she was in love, or whatever twisted version of love exists in the dark corners of corporate hotels. She wanted to legitimize her actions by explaining them. She wanted to prove that their connection was real, not just a fling. It started before that. She wrote back, "Porter Bay, the client pitch in October. We just connected. We talked until 3 in the morning at the hotel bar. Nothing happened then. I swear. But we both felt it. Porter Bay." I mentally checked my timeline. Dylan had expensed a rental car for that trip, and the Meridian conference. I asked, "Was that just talking to no?" She admitted. That was when it became physical. But we tried to stop. We really did. Dylan felt so guilty. He loves you, in his own way, but he feels stifled. He says you do not understand his ambition. I felt a flash of irritation not at the infidelity, but at the cliché. Stifled, as if my stable income and management of our entire domestic life was a cage. "Who paid for the room at the Meridian?" I asked. "Was it on his card or the company card?" "Why does that matter?" she asked. "Because I handle our finances." I lied smoothly. "I noticed a charge I didn't recognize. I just want to know if he's lying to me about money too." "He didn't pay." Camille wrote, eager to defend his honor. "I put it on the corporate account. It was a business trip. We were working late anyway. It was easier. Gotcha." My heart rate didn't jump. It just settled into a steady, predatory rhythm. She had just admitted to misappropriation of company funds. Using a corporate card for a romantic encounter was a fireable offense. In a pre-IPO company, it was a death sentence. "Okay," I typed. "Thanks for clarifying." Then, the tone of her messages shifted. The defensiveness melted into something pathetic and surprisingly human. "Harriet, please, I know I am the villain in your story, but I was the wife once too. My ex-husband left me for his yoga instructor. I know how this feels. I never wanted to be the other woman. But Dylan, he makes me feel seen. He is so talented. I have been pushing for his promotion because I genuinely believe he is the future of Nova Pulse. I got him onto the Vision Night Committee. I made sure his name is on the short list for the regional director role, not because we are sleeping together, but because he deserves it." I stared at the screen. She didn't realize what she was doing. She thought she was pleading for understanding. In reality, she was confessing to a conflict of interest so severe it could trigger an SEC investigation. She was admitting that her romantic feelings were influencing personnel decisions, promotions, and compensation. That was the definition of sexual favoritism. I decided to pull the thread a little harder. I decided to introduce fear. Does the board know he's on the short list because of you? I asked. What no? It is merit-based, she replied, too quickly. Camille, I wrote, using her name for the first time. You are a VP. You know how this looks. We are talking about an IPO. If the auditors find out the VP of Creative is funneling promotions and bonuses to her lover using company resources, that is not just a scandal, that is a liability. The three dots danced for a long time. Are you going to tell them? She finally asked. Please, this would destroy him. It would destroy me. We can stop. I will break it off. Just please, do not go to the company. She was begging. A woman who commanded a 6-figure salary and a team of 40 people was begging a fraud analyst in the suburbs for mercy. I typed my response slowly, savoring the ambiguity. I haven't decided what I'm going to do yet. Honestly, I'm just trying to understand the scope of the lie. There is nothing else, she promised, just the hotels and the late nights. The overtime was usually us at the wine bar on 4th Street. But that is it. Please, Harriet. If you tell the board, everything blows up. You should have thought about that before you sent a text about tasting my husband to my phone. I wrote, it was a mistake. Everything is a mistake until you get caught. I replied, then it becomes evidence. What does that mean? She asked. It means that from the moment you messaged me, you stopped being just a mistress. You became a witness and a subject. I put the phone down. I did not block her. I wanted the channel open. I wanted her to sweat. I wanted her to look at Dylan in the office tomorrow and wonder if I had pulled the trigger yet. Paranoia causes people to make mistakes. It makes them sloppy. I went back to my laptop. I opened the Heart Project folder. I created a new subfolder. Code of Conduct Violations. I dragged the screenshots of our conversation into it. Admission of using corporate funds for personal use. Confirmed. Admission of influence over promotion and compensation due to personal relationship. Confirmed. Admission of falsifying business trip details. Confirmed. If Camille had simply stayed silent after that first mistaken text, I would have had a suspicion and a single lewd message. I would have had a messy divorce, but not a corporate execution. But she couldn't help herself. She had to explain. She had to justify. She had to try to control the narrative. And in doing so, she had handed me the keys to the kingdom. I looked at the file count. 57 items. The dossier was no longer a collection of grievances. It was a weapon of mass destruction. And I was the only one who knew the launch codes. The opportunity presented itself on a Tuesday evening, over a dinner of takeout Thai food that Dylan was too excited to eat. He was pacing the kitchen, gesturing with a plastic fork, talking about synergy and market disruption with the manic energy of a man who believes he's about to become very rich. It is called Nova Pulse Vision Night, Dylan said, his eyes bright. It is not just a party, Harriet. It is the final push before the IPO roadshow. The investors will be there, the financial press. The Wall Street Journal is sending a reporter. And get this, Camille is the keynote speaker. She is going to present the restructuring plan, and she is going to announce the new leadership team. That means me. I sat quietly, picking at my pad thai. My mind was not on his promotion. It was on the logistics. Where is it happening? I asked. The Harborline Grand, the ballroom. Next Friday? It is going to be live-streamed to the satellite offices in London and Singapore. It is huge. Harriet, this is the night we officially arrive. I looked at him. He saw a celebration. I saw a stage. In fraud investigation. We talk about the control environment. Companies can hide small corruptions for years if they keep them in the dark corners of middle management. But an IPO, an initial public offering, is like turning on a floodlight in a dirty basement. Every receipt is scrutinized. Every executive is vetted. The reputation of the company becomes the stock price. If a scandal involving the misuse of corporate funds and sexual favoritism at the executive level were to break on a random Tuesday, it might be handled quietly by HR, a resignation, A severance package, a non-disclosure agreement, but if it broke on Vision Night in front of the press, in front of the investors. With the live stream running, the board of directors would have no choice. To save the IPO, they would have to perform a public sacrifice. They would have to show that they prioritized ethics over their star creative team. I needed to make sure Dylan and Camille were standing right in the center of the blast zone when the bomb went off. I picked up my phone under the table. I opened my thread with Camille. I had not texted her in 2 days, letting the silence ferment into anxiety. I hear Vision Night is the big reveal. I typed. Dylan is convinced he is getting the regional director title. Is he right, or is he just dreaming? Her reply came in 30 seconds. He is not dreaming. I made sure of it. I had to fight the CFO on the budget, but I got the new org chart approved this morning. Dylan is listed as regional creative director. It comes with a 20% raise and significant stock options. I felt a cold smile touch my lips. She had fought the CFO. She had used her political capital to promote her lover. It was textbook nepotism. Are you sure that is safe? I asked, playing the role of the worried wife. If people find out about you two, won't it look like you just gave him the job because you are sleeping with him? Nobody knows, she wrote back. And once the IPO happens, we will be untouchable. The board trusts me. I wrote the presentation myself. Dylan is going to be on the big screen. Harriet, I am building a future for him, for us, I guess, if you ever decide to let him go. She had just confirmed that she was using the company's flagship event to solidify a fraudulent promotion. She was not just hiding the affair. She was institutionalizing it. I needed to secure the delivery mechanism. The next morning, I met Mara Lewis at a coffee shop 3 towns over. I did not want to run into anyone we knew. Mara looked tired, but her eyes were sharp as she scanned the stack of papers I slid across the small metal table. This is radioactive, Mara said, tapping a finger on the printout of the text where Camille admitted to using the corporate card at the Hotel Meridian. But you cannot just email this to HR. Camille has been there for 10 years. She has allies in HR. They might bury it. They might tip her off and let her wipe the servers. So how do I kill it? I asked. You go over their heads, Mara said, lowering her voice. You go to the audit committee, you go to the board, and you go to the external counsel. Every company prepping for an IPO has an outside law firm vetting their compliance. Those lawyers do not care about Camille's career. They care about liability. If they see this, they are legally obligated to report it to the board immediately to prevent shareholder lawsuits. I want it to happen on Friday, I said. During the event, Mara looked at me over the rim of her espresso cup. That is theatrical, Harriet. It is necessary, I corrected. If I send it now, they cancel the event. They spin it. I want them to have no time to spin. I want them to have to make a decision while the cameras are rolling. Mara nodded slowly. Then you send it electronically to the key players exactly 10 minutes before the presentation starts. Mark it, urgent compliance violation. But Harriet, listen to me. If you do this, you are burning the village. You need to get your people out first. My people. Your money, Mara said bluntly. Once this hits, Dylan is going to be fired for cause, no severance, likely sued for restitution of the misappropriated funds. His assets could be frozen. If your name is on those accounts, you are frozen too. I spent the afternoon with a financial advisor who specialized in transitional wealth management, a polite term for divorce planning. I opened a new checking account at a completely different bank. I transferred $40,000, my share of our liquid savings, into it. I changed the direct deposit at my job. I reviewed the deed to our house. Thankfully, we were tenants in common, which meant my share of the equity was protected, provided I filed for separation before his debt swallowed the estate. I locked our joint credit cards. I told the bank I suspected fraud, which, technically, was true. By Thursday night, the infrastructure of my marriage had been dismantled. All that was left was the facade. I sat in my home office. The printer hummed rhythmically, spitting out warm sheets of paper. I assembled the dossier. It was 80 pages long. Section 1, the timeline, a chronological list of dates, times, and locations where Dylan and Camille were together while claiming to be on company business. Section 2. The financials. Copies of the receipts from the Laurel Room, Miro and Vine, and the Arcadia Suites, cross-referenced with Dylan's expense reports and Camille's corporate card usage. I highlighted the dates where she claimed client entertainment for dinners that were clearly romantic. Section 3. The confessions. High-resolution prints of the text messages, the taste you message, the admission of the affair, the admission of rigging the promotion, the admission of fighting the CFO to get Dylan more money. I prepared 3 thick manila envelopes. I printed labels for them, ensuring my handwriting would not be on anything. To Jonathan Eves, chairman of the board, Nova Pulse Media. To Sarah Jenkins, head of ethics and corporate compliance. To Sterling and Cromwell LLP, external audit counsel. I held the envelopes in my hands. They felt heavy. They contained the destruction of a man I had cooked dinner for 2,000 times. They contained the ruin of a woman who thought she was untouchable because she had a corner office. I looked at the clock. Vision night was 24 hours away. Dylan came home late again. He was carrying a garment bag containing his new tuxedo. He hung it on the bedroom door, admiring the sleek black fabric. "You are coming, right?" he asked, loosening his tie. "I put you on the guest list. You can stand in the VIP section, but try not to, look too intense. Just smile. This is a happy night." "I will be there," I said. My voice was steady. "I would not miss it for the world." "Great," he said, leaning down to kiss my cheek. He smelled of scotch and that cloying sandalwood cologne. "Camille says it is going to be a night nobody will ever forget." I looked at the 3 envelopes sitting on my desk, just out of his line of sight. "She is right," I said. "It really will be." The air in our bedroom that evening smelled like ambition and expensive dry cleaning. Dylan stood in front of the full-length mirror, adjusting the cuffs of his bespoke tuxedo. He looked like a movie star. He looked like the man I had fallen in love with, only polished to a high, synthetic shine. His hair was slicked back with a pomade I had never bought. His skin looked tighter, fresher. I stood in the doorway, clutching my clutch bag, and realized I was looking at a product. Camille Hart had not just slept with my husband. She had rebranded him. She had taken the raw material of a mid-level creative director and packaged him for the C-suite. "Do I look okay?" he asked, not turning around. He was admiring his own silhouette. "You look expensive," I said. He laughed, taking it as a compliment. "Harriet, tonight is important. I mean, really important. There are going to be guys there from Goldman and Sequoia. The press is going to be everywhere." He finally turned to me, his eyes scanning my navy blue dress with a critical, almost managerial assessment. "You look nice, safe. That is good." "Safe," I repeated. "Just try not to look so intense, okay?" He stepped closer, fixing my collar. "And please, do not make it weird with Camille. She is the star tonight. I do not want you cornering her and talking about domestic stuff. Just stand by the bar, have a drink, and smile when the camera pans to us. Can you do that?" "I can be very decorative," I said. "Perfect." He checked his watch. "Let's go. The limo is downstairs." The Harborline Grand was a fortress of glass and steel on the waterfront. Nova Pulse had rented the entire ballroom level. The lighting was programmed to the company's signature electric blue. It felt less like a business event and more like a nightclub for people who check the stock market on their phones every 3 minutes. We walked in, and the noise hit us a wall of chatter, clinking glass, and low-bass electronica. I saw her immediately. Camille was standing in the center of the room, near the ice sculpture. She was wearing a white, architectural gown that stood out violently against the sea of black suits and blue lighting. She looked radiant. She looked powerful. She was holding court, surrounded by a ring of men in gray suits who were hanging on her every word. Dylan practically vibrated beside me. He released my arm, a subtle, unconscious shedding of weight, and drifted toward her. He didn't walk up to her directly. He orbited. He stood just outside her circle, waiting for her gaze to flick toward him. When it did, I saw him touch his tie. A nervous, boyish gesture. I retreated to the shadows near the open bar. I ordered a tonic water with lime. I needed to be sober. My phone buzzed in my clutch. I pulled it out, shielding the screen from the passing waiter. It was a message from Camille. Are you here? I want you to see this. I want to prove to you that tonight makes everything worth it. Just watch. I looked up, across the room. Camille caught my eye. She raised her champagne flute in a tiny, almost imperceptible toast. It was not a gesture of friendship. It was a victory lap. She was telling me that she had won, that the risk of the affair was justified by the glory of this moment. She was wrong. She had just provided the final piece of evidence intent. She knew the risks, and she proceeded anyway because she believed the payoff justified the corruption. I looked at my watch. 7:50. The presentation was scheduled to start at 8 o'clock. Excuse me, I said to a woman standing near me. Where's the ladies' room? I did not go to the ladies' room. I found a quiet alcove near the coat check, a spot where the heavy velvet curtains dampened the thumping music. I pulled my slim laptop out of my oversized tote bag, the one Dylan had asked why I was bringing. I had told him I had some finishing touches to do on a freelance project. I sat on a velvet bench and opened the lid. I connected to the hotel Wi-Fi. I activated my VPN. I opened my drafted email. Attached was the PDF dossier. 80 pages of ruin. I checked the recipients one last time. Jonathan Eves, chairman of the board. Sarah Jenkins, chief ethics and compliance officer, the lead partner at Sterling and Cromwell, LLP. I took a deep breath. The air in the hallway was cool, but sweat was pricking at my hairline. My hands were freezing. This was it. There was no going back after this. I was not just ending my marriage. I was detonating a bomb inside a billion-dollar valuation. I typed the subject line one last time to ensure there were no typos. Urgent. Undisclosed relationship misuse of corporate resources pre-IPO. I set the priority to high. I requested a read receipt. I pressed send. I closed the laptop, shoved it back into my bag, and walked back into the ballroom. It was 7:55. I positioned myself near a pillar where I had a clear view of the VIP table in the front row. Jonathan Eves was sitting there, a silver-haired lion of industry, laughing with a potential investor. 7:57. I saw Eves stop laughing. He reached into his tuxedo pocket and pulled out his phone. He frowned. The light from the screen illuminated his face, casting deep shadows under his eyes. He scrolled. He stopped. He scrolled again. He tapped the shoulder of the man next to him, the external counsel. He showed him the phone. The lawyer's face went pale. He stood up immediately. Eves stood up a second later. He did not look angry. He looked terrified. They turned and walked briskly toward the exit, ignoring the people trying to shake their hands. The dominoes were falling. At 8 o'clock sharp, the lights dimmed. The music swelled to a crescendo. A spotlight hit the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, the announcer's voice boomed. Please welcome the visionary behind our new direction, Vice President of Creative, Camille Hart. The room erupted in applause. Camille walked onto the stage, beaming. She looked invincible. She stepped up to the podium, gripping the edges with confidence. Thank you, she said, her voice amplified and crystal clear. Tonight is about the future. Tonight is about seeing what others cannot see. I watched from the darkness. I saw the side door of the ballroom open. Sarah Jenkins, the head of ethics, walked in. She was not wearing evening wear. She was wearing a charcoal pantsuit. She was flanked by a man I did not recognize, but he had the distinct, heavy presence of corporate security. They did not rush. They moved with the terrifying slowness of a glacier. They walked along the wall, heading toward the backstage area. On stage, Camille was hitting her stride. We are building a team that is redefining the industry, she said, clicking a remote. The massive LED screen behind her shifted. A photo appeared. It was a headshot of Dylan. He looked handsome, authoritative, and completely out of his depth. Leaders like Dylan Foster, Camille said, gesturing to the screen. Our new regional creative director. Dylan represents the passion and integrity of Nova Pulse. I saw Dylan in the crowd. He was beaming. He was clapping. He looked like a child on Christmas morning. Then, the audio cut out. It wasn't a feedback screech. It was a hard cut. The microphone went dead. Camille tapped the mic. "Hello?" she mouthed. She looked confused. She looked toward the sound booth. The music stopped. The room fell into a heavy, confused silence. The master of ceremonies walked onto the stage from the left wing. He looked pale. He walked up to Camille, who was still smiling, trying to play it off as a technical glitch. He did not smile back. He placed a hand over the dead microphone, but in the silence of the room, his voice carried just enough. "Ms. Hart," he said, and I saw his lips move clearly. "We need you to step off the stage." Camille pulled back, her smile faltering. "What I am in the middle of the keynote." "Now, ma'am," the MC said. He wasn't asking. He turned to the audience. He raised a handheld microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the interruption. We have a slight adjustment to the program due to an urgent compliance matter that has been brought to the board's attention. Please enjoy the refreshments while we resolve this." Compliance matter. The phrase hung in the air like smoke. Camille looked at the side of the stage. She saw Sarah Jenkins standing there, arms crossed. She saw the security guard. I saw the moment the realization hit her. It wasn't a gradual understanding, it was a physical blow. Her eyes went wide. The color drained from her face so fast she looked like a ghost against her white dress. She looked at the audience. She looked for Dylan. But Dylan wasn't looking at her. He was staring at his phone, which had just started vibrating in his pocket. Camille took a step back, her heel catching on the stage floor. She stumbled, righted herself, and then let herself be led away by the MC, walking toward the executioner waiting in the wings. The screen behind her still showed Dylan's face, smiling down on the disaster, frozen in a loop of triumph that had already expired. The moment Camille disappeared behind the heavy black curtains, the ballroom underwent a fascinating chemical change. The silence that had initially blanketed the room fractured into 1,000 whispers. It sounded like the hum of a high-voltage wire. On the massive LED screen, Dylan's smiling face, the face of the new leadership, flickered once, distorted into static, and was abruptly replaced by the generic, rotating blue logo of Novapulse Media. It was a digital guillotine. 1 second he was the future, the next, he was deleted. I stood by the pillar, sipping my tonic water, watching the ecosystem collapse. To my left, a group of junior analysts were already checking their phones, likely refreshing the company's stock ticker or checking blind to see if layoffs were imminent. To my right, 2 men in expensive suits, investors. Judging by the Patek Philippe watches, were exchanging dark looks. "Is this a bit?" one asked. "Is this some kind of disruptive performance art?" "No," the other replied, buttoning his jacket. "That was compliance. I have seen that walk before. We need to call the fund manager. Now." Dylan was vibrating. That is the only way to describe him. He was standing in the middle of the crowd, spinning in a tight circle, his eyes scanning the room for Camille. He looked like a child who had lost his mother in a supermarket. He pulled out his phone. He typed furiously. He held the phone to his ear. He pulled it away. He typed again. He saw me and rushed over, his face glistening with a sheen of sweat that the expensive foundation could not hide. "Did you see where she went?" he asked, breathless. "It must be a technical issue." The mic cut out. Maybe the feed dropped. I looked at him with wide, innocent eyes. "I do not know." "Dylan," the MC looked serious. "Maybe it is about the campaign numbers. You said the data was volatile." "It is not the numbers," he snapped, his voice cracking. "The numbers are perfect. I vetted them myself." His phone rang. It was a jarring, shrill sound in the pockets of his tuxedo. He looked at the screen, his brow furrowed. "It is HR," he said, confused. "Why is HR calling me on a Friday night during the gala?" He answered. "Hello, yes, this is Dylan." I watched the color drain from his face. It was not a gradual fade. It was instant. He went gray. "I do not understand," he stammered. "I am in the middle of the event. Can this wait until Monday, My wife is here." He listened for another 10 seconds. He swallowed hard. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay. Meeting room 4, 4th floor. I am coming." He lowered the phone. He looked at me, but he didn't really see me. He looked through me to a terrifying future he was just beginning to glimpse. "I have to go upstairs," he said. His voice was hollow. "They said to bring my badge and my company phone." "Is everything okay?" I asked. Placing a hand on his arm, I felt his muscles twitch. "I do not know," he said. "Stay here. Order a drink. I will be right back. It is probably just a formality, some paperwork for the promotion." He was lying to himself. He turned and walked toward the service elevators, his shoulders hunched. The swagger of the regional creative director completely evaporated. I watched the elevator doors close. I did not stay. I did not order a drink. I walked out the front doors of the Harbor Line Grand, hailed a cab, and went home. The house was dark and quiet. I poured myself a glass of water and sat at the kitchen island. I opened my personal email. There was a message from Sarah Jenkins, Head of Ethics, received at 8:42 in the evening. Subject receipt of whistleblower complaint. Case 492. Dear Ms. Foster, we acknowledge receipt of your documentation regarding Ms. Hart and Mr. Foster, given the severity of the evidence provided, specifically regarding the misappropriation of pre-IPO funds and undisclosed conflicts of interest. We have initiated an immediate internal investigation, effective immediately. Both individuals have been placed on administrative leave pending inquiry. Please be advised that as the reporting party, your identity is protected under our corporate whistleblower policy, though given your relationship to the subject, anonymity may be difficult to maintain internally. We may require further cooperation. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. I closed the laptop. Protected. The word felt heavy. I slept soundly for the first time in 6 weeks. The next morning, my phone rang at 9 o'clock. It was an unknown number. "Hello? Harriet." It was Dylan, but it sounded like a ghost of Dylan. His voice was trembling, pitched high with panic. "Dylan, where are you? Why are you calling from this number?" "I am at a coffee shop near the office," he said. He sounded like he was crying. "They took my phone, Harriet. They took my laptop. They escorted me out of the building at midnight. Security watched me pack a box, a cardboard box." "What happened?" I asked. "Did they tell you why?" "They said I'm suspended," he choked out. "Pending an investigation into financial irregularities and policy violations. Camille is gone too. Nobody can find her. Her email bounced back when I tried to message her from this burner phone." He took a ragged breath. "Someone set us up. Harriet, someone fabricated something, I do not know who. But someone who is jealous of my promotion hacked the system. They are trying to frame me." I sat in the morning sun, holding my mug. I swirled the coffee. "Frame you for what? Dylan? For things I didn't do, or things that are being taken out of context. Like the hotel rooms?" I asked. The line went dead silent. The background noise of the coffee shop, the grinding beans, the chatter seemed to swell. "What?" he whispered. "The hotel rooms," I repeated, my voice calm, level, and utterly devoid of warmth. "And the dinners at Miro and Vine, and the text messages about tasting each other." "Harriet," he breathed. Do you really think," I cut in, "that a text message sent to your wife by mistake counts as someone setting you up?" The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bone. I could hear his brain misfiring, trying to rewrite the last 6 weeks, trying to figure out how the docile wife who baked casseroles had become the architect of his demise. "It was you," he said. It wasn't a question. "You sent the file." "I sent the truth, Dylan. I just organized it for them." "You destroyed my life," he screamed, the sound distorted over the cheap connection. "You vindictive, crazy bitch. You ruined my career. We were about to go public. Do you have any idea how much money you just cost me? You cost us—" "I didn't cost us anything," I said. "I protected myself, and frankly, Dylan, You should be thanking me. I saved you from committing securities fraud. That carries a prison sentence." "I am coming home," he snarled. "We are going to talk about this." "You can come home," I said. "But the locks are changed, and your clothes are in boxes on the front porch. I would suggest you pick them up before it rains." I hung up. That evening, another email arrived. This one was not from HR. It was from Sterling and Cromwell, LLP, the external counsel for the board. "Dear Mrs. Foster, we have been retained by the board of Nova Pulse Media to conduct an independent review. Based on the digital evidence you provided, we would like to schedule a formal interview with you next Tuesday at 10 o'clock in the morning. Attached is a summary of the initial findings we have corroborated, including the transcript of the text exchange between yourself and Ms. Hart dated December 3rd. I opened the attachment. It was a formal legal document, stamped confidential. Paragraph 4 read, Evidence Item 4A, on December 3rd, at 00 hours and 45 minutes. Ms. Hart messaged the reporting party. I put it on the corporate account. It was a business trip. We were working late anyway. It was easier. This admission directly contradicts the expense report filed by Ms. Hart on December 5th. I stared at the words, my text message, my trap. It was now Evidence Item 4A. I opened my calendar app. Tuesday, 10 o'clock in the morning, interview with Sterling and Cromwell. Tuesday, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, initial consultation with Olivia Crane, divorce attorney. I looked at the two appointments sitting side by side. One was the end of his career, the other was the end of our marriage. Perfect, I said to the empty room. I can get it all done in one day. I poured the rest of the wine down the sink. I didn't need it. I needed to be sharp. Tuesday was going to be a bloodbath, and I intended to be the only one walking out without a stain on my suit. The office of Crane and Holloway Family Law was located in a strip mall 3 blocks from the county courthouse. It smelled of dust and lemon furniture polish. My lawyer, Olivia Crane, did not have a view of the skyline. She had a view of a dry cleaner, but she had a reputation for shredding prenuptial agreements like they were tissue paper. We sat at her small oak desk, reviewing the wreckage of my 7-year marriage. You were smart to ask for the infidelity clause back then, Olivia said, tapping a manicured fingernail on the document I had signed when I was 25. Most people think it is unromantic. I call it insurance. I nodded. At the time, Dylan had laughed about it. He had signed it with a flourish, joking that he would never have the energy to cheat on me. It turned out he found the energy. He just borrowed it from his company. We need to file today. Harriet, Olivia said, looking me in the eye. Right now, Dylan is in shock. He is trying to save his career. He is not thinking about the equity in the house or the joint brokerage account. We need to lock the assets before he realizes he is going to need money for a criminal defense attorney. I signed the petition. The pen scratched loudly in the quiet room. Reason for dissolution, adultery, and breach of trust. It felt clinical. It felt like signing a vendor contract. You are doing the right thing, Olivia said as she gathered the papers. Do not let anyone tell you that you are being too harsh. When a ship is sinking, you do not apologize for getting on the life raft, but people were already telling me I was too harsh. My phone rang as I was driving home. It was Naomi, my best friend since college. She sounded breathless, like she had been running. Harriet, she said, I just got off the phone with Dylan. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. Of course he had called her. He was rallying the troops. He was trying to win the court of public opinion since he had already lost the boardroom. What did he say? Naomi, I asked. He is a mess. Harriet, he is sobbing. He said you blindsided him. He said you ruined the biggest night of his life because you were jealous of his success. He told me that the thing with Camille was just a mentorship that got out of hand and that you blew it up into a federal crime just to humiliate him. I stayed silent. I turned onto my street. Harriet, Naomi pressed. Is it true? Did you really send private texts to the board of directors? Because that is intense. I mean, he is your husband. People are saying you went nuclear over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. I pulled into my driveway. I put the car in park. Naomi, I said calmly, I am going to send you 3 images. Look at them. Then tell me if I overreacted. I hung up. I opened my gallery. Image 1. The text message from the night of the mistake. I can still taste you. Image 2. My reply giving her a choice to stop. Image 3. Camille's confession. I put it on the corporate account. It was a business trip. We were working late anyway. It was easier. I watched the phone. 1 minute passed, then 2. My phone buzzed. A text from Naomi. I am sorry. I am so sorry. He lied to me. He told me she was just a friend. I will ask you first next time before I believe a single word that comes out of a man's mouth. I did not reply. I didn't have the energy to manage her guilt. I had to manage my own survival. The family front was even messier. Dylan's mother called me that evening. She did not say hello. You are a destroyer, she hissed. The venom in her voice was startling. You could have handled this privately. You could have gone to counseling. Men make mistakes. Harriet, it is biology. But to destroy his career, to humiliate him in front of the whole world, that is evil. You were never good enough for him, and now you have proven it. I let her speak. I let her drain her poison. When she finally stopped to take a breath, I spoke. He did not just cheat. Mary, he stole. And I was not going to go to jail with him just to protect your family reputation. I hung up and blocked her number. 10 minutes later, a text arrived from Dylan's sister, Chloe. We had never been particularly close, but she had gone through a brutal divorce 3 years ago. Mom is on a warpath. Ignore her. She is just mad because her retirement plan was Dylan making it big. You did the brave thing. I wish I had burned my ex's life down instead of just crying in the bathroom. Stay strong. It was a small victory, but I took it. The silence from the other side broke 2 days later. I received an email with a subject line that made my pulse jump. Cease and desist. Notice of intent to sue. It was from Arthur Sterling, the lawyer who had called me in the very beginning, the man representing Camille Hart. He had decided to go on the offensive. Dear Ms. Foster, we are formally notifying you of our intent to file a civil suit regarding the invasion of privacy, defamation of character, and malicious entrapment of my client. Ms. Camille Hart, you deliberately orchestrated a scenario to solicit incriminating information from my client under false pretenses. The dissemination of private correspondence to the board of directors of Nova Pulse Media constitutes a tortious interference with business relations. We demand an immediate retraction of your statements to the board and a public apology, or we will seek damages in excess of $5 million. I read the email twice. $5 million. It was a number designed to terrify me. It was a number designed to make me call Dylan and beg for a truce. I forwarded the email to Mara and Olivia. Mara called me 5 minutes later. She was laughing. He is bluffing. Harriet, she said, this is desperate. He is trying to scare you into withdrawing your testimony before the internal investigation concludes. But what about the entrapment, I asked. It is not entrapment if she texted you first, Mara said. And it is not privacy invasion if she voluntarily confessed to a crime on an unsecured channel. You are a whistleblower. Harriet, you are protected by federal statutes. If they sue you, they open themselves up to discovery. That means we get to depose Camille under oath about everything. Every email, every expense report. Trust me, Arthur Sterling does not want Camille on a witness stand. So what do I do? You ignore it, Mara said, and you get ready, because if they are sending threats, it means they know they are drowning. The final blow came on a Friday afternoon. I was sitting at my kitchen table, paying bills from my new individual account. The doorbell rang. A process server stood on the porch. He was a bored-looking man in a windbreaker. Harriet Foster, he asked. Yes. He handed me a thick envelope. You have been served. I opened it. It wasn't the lawsuit from Camille. It was a subpoena. Deposition subpoena for personal appearance. In the matter of the internal investigation of Nova Pulse Media regarding compliance violations by Dylan Foster and Camille Hart, you are commanded to appear at the offices of Sterling and Cromwell LLP on Tuesday, December 16th, at 10 o'clock in the morning to provide testimony. I looked at the date, Tuesday. Then I looked at the other envelope on the table, the one Olivia had sent over by courier an hour ago. It contained the proof of service for the divorce papers. Dylan had been served at his parents' house this morning. Tuesday was going to be busy. I walked out onto the back deck. The air was cold. Winter was coming to Riverside Hill. I thought about Dylan. I thought about the way he used to look at me before the money and the ambition rot set in. I thought about the life we had planned. It was all gone, burned to ash by a few lines of code and a few moments of weakness. But as I stood there, shivering slightly in the wind, I realized something. I wasn't afraid of the deposition. I wasn't afraid of Camille's lawyer. I wasn't afraid of being alone. I was ready to finish it. A company collapses all at once. A marriage collapses the same way. It is best to handle both demolitions at the same time. That way, you only have to sweep up the dust once. I went back inside and marked the date on my calendar. Tuesday. The day I would walk into a room full of lawyers and tell them exactly how a mistress destroyed a dynasty with a single typo. The conference room at Sterling and Cromwell LLP was designed to intimidate. It was a glass box suspended 20 floors above the city, furnished with a mahogany table long enough to land a small aircraft on. In the center of the table sat a digital recorder, its small red light blinking rhythmically, capturing every breath of the destruction about to unfold. I sat on one side, flanked by Mara. On the other side sat Camille Hart and her pit bull of a lawyer, Arthur Sterling. At the far end of the table sat the legal counsel for Nova Pulse Media, a man named Mr. Henderson, who looked like he had not slept since the Vision Night disaster. And in the corner, sitting on a folding chair like a scolded child, was Dylan. He looked gray. His suit, usually so sharp, hung loosely on his frame. He refused to make eye contact with me. Mr. Sterling cleared his throat. He opened a thick binder. "Let us begin," he said. His voice was smooth, practiced. "We are here to establish the facts regarding the alleged misconduct, but primarily, we are here to discuss the conduct of Mrs. Harriet Foster, who we believe engaged in a malicious campaign of entrapment against my client." He looked at me over the rim of his glasses. "Mrs. Foster," he began, "you claim that you were merely a passive recipient of information, yet, looking at the transcript, you seem to be driving the conversation. You were fishing. You were leading my client into making damaging statements." "I was asking questions," I said. My voice was even. "You were manipulating a vulnerable woman," Sterling countered, his voice rising. "You received a text message by mistake. A normal person, a person without an agenda, would have simply replied, 'Wrong number,' and blocked the sender. You did not do that. You engaged. Why?" "I needed to ascertain the nature of the threat to my marriage," I said. "And to your husband's career," Sterling pressed. "You knew he was up for a promotion. You knew the IPO was coming. You timed this perfectly to inflict maximum damage. Admit it, Mrs. Foster, you are not a whistleblower. You are a jealous wife who wanted revenge." He pulled a sheet of paper from his binder. "I want you to read your first response to the record," Sterling commanded. "Read it loud enough for the microphone." I picked up the paper. I did not hesitate. I looked directly at Camille as I read. "He is asleep next to his wife, but thank you for the detailed update on my husband's schedule." Sterling leaned back, a smug smile playing on his lips. "Sarcasm? Hostility? Does that sound like a woman concerned with corporate ethics? No. It sounds like a woman settling a score. You baited her. You terrified her into silence, and then you coaxed her into revealing details about company spending. Why didn't you just go to HR immediately?" "Because I needed to know if it was an isolated incident or a pattern of corruption," I replied. "You are not an investigator for Nova Pulse, Mrs. Foster," Sterling snapped. "You have no jurisdiction here." "Actually," I said. "I do," I nodded to Mara. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a printout from the Nova Pulse Employee Handbook, specifically the section on ethics and compliance. She slid it across the mahogany table toward the company lawyer. "Mr. Henderson." "Section 4.2, Mara said calmly. The company encourages all employees and associated parties to report any suspicion of fraud, misuse of assets, or abuse of power, whether observed directly or indirectly. The policy explicitly protects the reporter from retaliation and encourages thorough documentation before reporting. Mr. Henderson picked up the paper. He adjusted his glasses. He nodded slowly. "That is our standard policy," he confirmed. "Mrs. Foster acted in accordance with the guidelines we provide to all stakeholders." Sterling's face flushed a deep, angry red. He realized he was losing the narrative. He turned his aggression toward the text logs. "Fine," he spat. "Let us look at the later messages. Mrs. Foster asks, 'Who paid for the room?' My client answers. Mrs. Foster asks, 'Did you influence the promotion?' My client answers, 'It is an interrogation.' My client felt coerced. She felt that if she didn't answer, Mrs. Foster would go public. That is duress. She confessed to using shareholder money to pay for a hotel room to sleep with a subordinate. I said, cutting him off. "Is that duress, Mr. Sterling, or is that theft?" "It is standard industry practice." The shout did not come from Sterling. It came from Camille. She had been sitting silently, staring at her hands, but something inside her had finally snapped. The pressure, the humiliation, the sheer exhaustion of the lie had caused a rupture. She slammed her hand on the table. "Stop acting like I'm some criminal," she screamed, her voice shrill and desperate. "I brought in millions of dollars for that company. I built the creative team from nothing. So what if I put a few dinners on the card? So what if I helped Dylan get a job he was qualified for? Do you think the male VPs aren't doing the exact same thing? I only did what every man in this industry does every single day. But because I am a woman, and because I slept with the wrong guy, suddenly, I am a monster." The room went dead silent. Sterling closed his eyes. He knew it was over. His client had just admitted, on the record, to abusing her power because everyone else does it. I looked at her. She was breathing heavily, her chest heaving, her eyes wild with a mix of defiance and terror. She looked pathetic. I leaned forward. I spoke softly, but in the acoustic perfection of the room, my voice hit her like a hammer. "The problem is not who you love, Camille, and the problem is not even that you are a woman. The problem is that you signed a contract promising not to sleep with your subordinates or spend shareholder money on your own pleasure. You signed it. And then you were arrogant enough to think that a woman you deemed irrelevant, would keep your dirty secret for you just because you asked nicely." I sat back. "I think we are done here." Mr. Henderson, the company lawyer, cleared his throat. He reached out and turned off the digital recorder. The red light died. "I have heard enough," Henderson said. He did not look at Sterling. He looked at Camille, then at Dylan. "Ms. Hart, based on your own testimony today and the evidence provided by Mrs. Foster, Novapulse Media is upholding its decision to terminate your employment for cause, gross misconduct, fiduciary negligence. We will also be seeking restitution for the unauthorized expenses. You will be hearing from our litigation department regarding the repayment schedule." Camille put her head in her hands. Henderson turned to the corner. "Mr. Foster." Dylan looked up. His eyes were red. "Your contract is also terminated immediately," Henderson said, his voice cold. "Collusion to conceal a conflict of interest is a violation of your employment agreement. There will be no severance package. There will be no stock options. You are effective immediately barred from the premises." Dylan didn't speak. He just nodded, a jerky, broken motion. We stood up. Mara squeezed my arm. We walked out of the glass box, leaving the wreckage behind us. I walked down the long, carpeted hallway toward the elevators. I pressed the button. "Harriet." I heard footsteps running behind me. I turned. It was Dylan. He stopped a few feet away. He looked like he had aged 10 years in the last hour. "Harriet, please," he said. His voice was cracked. "Wait. What do you want?" "Dylan." "I am sorry," he stammered. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But did you hear them? They took everything. I have nothing. No job, no money, no reputation. I heard, I said. He took a step closer, his eyes pleading. But maybe this is a sign. Maybe we needed to hit rock bottom to rebuild. I can change. Harriet, I can be the man you married again. We can start over. Just you and me. No Camille, no Nova Pulse. Just us. Please, give me one chance. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had gaslighted me for months. The man who had mocked me in texts to his mistress. The man who had called me paranoid while he spent our savings on hotel rooms. I reached into my tote bag. I pulled out a thick envelope. The court stamp on the top was fresh. We are starting over. Dylan, I said, handing him the envelope. He took it, confused. He looked down at the bold letters, Decree of Dissolution of Marriage. This is the fresh start, I said. It just does not include you in my story anymore. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. I stepped inside. I pressed the button for the lobby. I watched him standing there in the hallway, holding his divorce papers, as the doors slid shut, cutting him out of my view forever. 3 months later, I sat on the balcony of my new apartment. It was smaller than the house in the suburbs. It was a 1-bedroom in the city center, overlooking the park. But it was mine. The lease was in my name. The furniture was mine. The peace was mine. I had a new job at Northbridge Analytics, senior investigator. The pay was better, and the hours were honest. I sat at a small bistro table with 2 chairs, one for me, one for whoever or whatever I chose to invite into my life next. I picked up my phone. I scrolled down to a message thread that hadn't been touched in 90 days. Heart Project. I scrolled to the very top. I looked at that first message one last time. I can still taste you. It felt like reading a message from a stranger. The Harriet who had received that text, the scared, suspicious wife, was gone. In her place was a woman who knew exactly what she was worth and exactly what she was capable of. I smiled. I pressed edit. I selected the thread. I pressed delete. Are you sure you want to delete this conversation? The phone asked. Yes, I whispered. I tapped the screen. The thread vanished. The screen went blank. I set the phone down on the table, face down. I picked up my wine glass and looked out at the city lights. The air was crisp and clean. For the first time in 100 years, or maybe just 7, I took a breath that felt entirely my own. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed the journey of Harriet Foster and her calculated path to justice. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Please leave a comment below and let me know which city or country you are representing if you enjoyed this revenge story. Please make sure to subscribe to the Zoe Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button so we can share this story with even more listeners. Your support means the world to us. See you in the next story.